Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I have with me on the stage here Pat Almazan, who's the daughter of Frank Toplansky, Paul Polson, the brother of Deborah Paulson, and Sergeant John Radis of the Fullerton Police Department. And as you probably know, this was a Fullerton case, so the Fullerton Police Department is, of course, involved. If Edward Allaway gets his way, the notorious mass murder in Orange County history will soon become the first mass murderer in recent American history to be released from custody. Perhaps as a first step to his freedom, officials at Napa State Hospital transferred Allaway unilaterally, without notification, to idyllic Napa State Hospital. It would take him approximately 10 to 15 minutes from where he's going to be in Napa State Hospital to walk to the street. It's a real concern that he's in Napa State Hospital. That hospital doesn't have any walls. It's only partially fenced in, and there's a likelihood, of course, that if he's there, under the circumstances that we've seen in this case, that they would give him ground privileges. And so here he is, just a few minutes from a public street, and able to walk out if he wished. So Edward Allaway had a history of mental illness, workplace violence, marital discord, racism, and a preoccupation with weapons even before he moved to California in 1972. Once in California, he continued his violent ways, including numerous fistfights with coworkers and beating and raping his estranged wife. On July 12, 1976, he took a rifle that he had bought just a few days before, took it with him to work. He was working as a janitor at California State University in Fullerton. In a span of a few minutes, he brought terror and death to the campus library as he gunned down 9 of his coworkers. He gunned them down in cold blood, killing 7 of them with shots to the head and the heart. Although Allaway could have been given the death penalty for his crimes, the trial judge found him not guilty by reason of insanity and found him criminally insane. He was then committed to the state hospital for 7 life terms. Since then, Allaway has petitioned for his release from the hospital 5 separate times, necessitating a trial each time to determine determine whether or not he was safe to be released to the community. Each trial caused a firestorm of controversy in Orange County, reasonably alarming citizens of the possibility of a mass murderer returning to their streets. Each of Allaway's petitions for release re-victimized surviving family members, bringing back old emotions and the fresh fear that the killer might again be released and that he might regain his freedom. Over and over, hospital staff have testified on his behalf, saying that he's cured, that he's no longer dangerous. Some of the things that the hospital staff have said about Allaway, that Allaway is appropriate for release to the community and does not exhibit psychotic symptoms, that he's not assaultive, that he appears to handle frustration well, that he doesn't receive medications, that there's little evidence of either continuing mental illness or continuing dangerousness. They say that he's not experiencing symptoms of mental illness, including hallucinations, delusions, and paranoia. They say that he's symptom-free, that he has no history of violence other than his commitment offense. Wisely, the courts have rejected the hospital staff's testimony, finding them to be ill-informed about Allaway's, particularly about his history and about the danger to the public safety. Now, despite no change in the circumstances since his last rejected petition, Napa State Hospital inexplicably, without any notice to the DA or without any notice to Allaway's victims, unilaterally transferred Allaway to this state hospital in Napa. Why? Are they trying to quietly recommend his release? And it looks like it. I mean, they've been trying to have him released for years. It looks like maybe they're trying to send him up north and have a quiet release. If that's the recommendation, Orange County will again find itself gearing up for another expensive trial and wondering how the state hospital system could be so blind to the magnitude of the risks that this rampage killer poses. Time and time again, new evaluators found Allaway asymptomatic without having his full background and recommended his release. Allaway's hospital teams have historically seemed to know little more about his history other than the bare fact that he was found not guilty by reason of insanity of multiple counts of murder. Because Allaway's not been a significant behavior problem in the hospital, and he's not been on medication for many years, and he's maintained a good clinical presentation, the treatment team has repeatedly deemed him safe for release. His victims, understandably so, are in complete fear of finding Allaway on their doorsteps in ambush. I'm sending a letter to Governor Brown. We have those prepared. I'm sending a letter to Governor Brown, to the Napa State Hospital, and to Patton State Hospital to request a meet with them to talk about their policies, about their current policies, and to get some changes in the procedures for how they're doing these things. What happened 2 weeks ago, this transfer, simply shouldn't happen again. It shouldn't happen to Ms. Almazan, shouldn't happen to Mr. Paulson, shouldn't happen to the people of Orange County, shouldn't happen to anyone. Allaway should never be released, period. Please hear from Ms. Almazan and Mr. Paulson. Step aside, your turn. Okay. Oh, okay, his turn.
My name is Paul Paulson, and my sister was Debbie Paulson, one of 7 innocent people murdered on July 12th, 1976 by Edward Allaway. For 40 years, we have had to endure the loss of our loved ones to a vicious, calculating killer, and then regularly endure the legal and psychiatric maneuverings of his team to get him released. So here we are again today in the latest chapter. I wholeheartedly object to his move from Patton State Hospital to Napa State Hospital, which, as Mr. Rakakis told you, is very less secure. And equally important, I object to the move without any prior notification to the victims' families or even the district attorney's office. This, in my mind, is a reprehensible action and an eventual threat to me personally as well as our local communities. As I sat waiting for this press conference to start, I was reading the backside of the business card from the district attorney's office. And let me read to you what the mission statement of this department is. The mission of the Office of the District Attorney of Orange County is to enhance public safety and welfare and create a sense of security in the community. Well, this latest maneuvering, I certainly do not have a sense of safety, welfare, and security in the community. God help us all if he is ever released in any way, shape, or form. Thank you.
My name is Patricia Almazan, and I'm the daughter of Frank Toplansky. He was murdered in 1976 on campus at Cal State Fullerton. He was shot in the back of the head and shot in the back 2 times. Very cowardly act on the part of Edward Allaway. Once again, Edward Allaway has been quietly transferred to a less secure facility in Napa State Hospital without notice, as has been mentioned, to the DA's office or to the victims. And we've gone on record asking to please be notified. He was inappropriately transferred in 1992, and the facility is not fenced. It was deemed an egregious move, and he was moved back to Patton. He's been moved back and forth trying to get released, and because he was adjudicated under not guilty under reason of NGRI, the system is so flawed and sneaky that the life of a mass murderer is more important than the lives of his many victims. It should not be this difficult to keep a mass murderer behind bars. And if he is released, it sets a very dangerous precedent, not only for California, but for the entire United States, because it becomes case law. And when it becomes case law, then any mass murderer can get out. We can't allow this to happen. And we need people to write letters and to take this very serious, because this is a very serious move. And if he gets released, no one will be safe. Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if there are any questions, we could take those. Yes, ma'am.
This is a release that the DA's office as well as family members have been fighting for decades. So can you just describe what's different this time around, why he was transferred without your notification, and honestly the likelihood that someday he may be able to hurt?
Well, what's different this time is that this is just a silent move. He's just moved quietly from Patton State Hospital to Napa, and it has the appearance of a prelude to his release. I think it's clear from the history that the medical staff in the state hospitals wanted to release him for years. It's actually kind of astounding the way they look at things. I mean, I can tell you that I was there a few years ago and talked to the medical director at Patton State Hospital along with some other of the medical staff, and then it's like they're from a different world in terms of their thinking. I mean, they just looked at me and said, "Do you realize he's been symptom-free for 23 years?" Well, of course he's symptom-free. I mean, he hasn't killed anyone while he's incarcerated in the state hospital. But they're looking at his behavior while he's in the state hospital, and since he's behaving well, they're working on his release. So I think they're actively working on his release. I think that this is a prelude to giving him greater privileges and eventually releasing him to the community. Can't say that for sure because they haven't said anything at all. So that's just how it appears. But I think they need to know, certainly, that there isn't going to be anything quiet about releasing a mass murderer like Edward Allaway. Yes, sir.
How was it brought to your attention? How did you find it?
How did we find out?
I just heard a blurb on the radio about a murderer being moved, and I just instinctively felt, I didn't know, but I thought, I bet it's Allaway. So I called Patton State Hospital and found out from a social worker that they had transferred him 2 weeks ago.
So other than the letters that you're writing, is there any sort of legal action you can take regarding this move or the lack of information that was provided to your office?
There isn't any legal action that we can take at this point until we see a report or a recommendation for release or a recommendation for release to the community as far as like making him an outpatient. We're not able to take any action. But they have in the past, on a number of occasions, recommended his release to the community as an outpatient, and we have fought that in court and prevailed.
Is there a legal obligation to notify the DA's office if there was a transfer like this?
Question is whether or not there's a legal obligation for them to notify the DA's office and the victims. No, there isn't. There's not a legal obligation that applies to the state hospitals, although there is such an obligation that applies to the prison system. We would think that just as a matter of courtesy, that they would give us that notification, but they chose not to.